Hey guys, how's it going? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you so much for checking out another one of our super cool studio gear reviews. Today I have another plug-in review for you guys. I'm going to be taking a look at Arturia's V-Collection 7. Okay, this is my personal kind of synth suite plugin of choice, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm going to go over as many of them as I can while keeping this video a reasonable length. Just a heads up before I get into it, I'm not really going to do any audio demoing of the sounds that are included in this, where we're actually listening to them, because there are literally tens of thousands of presets and like 24 different synth and keyboard modules in it, so it's just a little bit too much to try to really get an accurate sound demo of. I know there's lots and lots of other videos out there that do have some sounds in them, so I would recommend going and checking those out if you want some actual sounds. But what I'm going to focus on instead is just kind of the feature set, what all it comes with, and some of the reasons why I think it's one of the strongest synth plugin collections on the market today. Okay, so V-Collection 7, it comes with a ton. It is incredibly full-featured. All of the controls are very, very cool, and it does sound amazing. I know I just said we're not going to be doing really a sound demo here, but pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about, 98% of it sounds pretty much flawless. I will point out a few plugins where I think that they could sound a little bit stronger or a little bit more authentic, but overall just kind of assume, and I'm sure I'll say this a bunch, but everything really, really does sound wonderful. And that's really the first point where I think it's great, and that's kind of where I start from when thinking about this whole bundle, is that everything in it does sound really, really authentic. It sounds and feels very analog, especially all of the stuff that really are clones of some of these vintage synthesizers. It all sounds great, okay? So let's just start from that. It sounds awesome. But beyond that, it is just so full-featured, and it comes with so much cool stuff and so many kind of desirable pieces that it's really amazing. It's really very, very cool what they've been able to do. So, quick rundown of everything that you get with V-Collection 7. We get our 2600, we get a Hammond B3, we get a Buchla Easel, we get a Hohner Clavinet, we get a CMI, which is kind of a sample-based, one of the first sample or PCM-based synthesizers ever made. Yamaha Cs-80, of course, legendary for its use by Vangelis on the soundtrack for Blade Runner, classic 80s sci-fi kind of horror movie track sounds. We get a Casio CZ, or CZ1, I believe is the original synth here, which is a really affordable FM synth from the 80s, kind of the poor man's DX7, which has some very cool and unique sounds. We get an actual DX7, the Yamaha DX7, classic FM synth. We get a Farfisa organ, which is a really fun, kind of a cheesy sounding, intentionally cheesy sounding organ that was popular on a lot of old records in the 50s and 60s. Of course, the legendary Roland Jup-8, one of the most famous polysynths of all time. The Matrix 12 Mellotron. Everybody knows the Mellotron tape sampling synthesizer from the 1960s. A mini Moog, or sometimes called the Moog Model D. Modular V3, which I believe is based around the Moog modular synthesis system from the 70s. Grand piano system, Piano V2 as it's called, which includes a bunch of really great piano models. Prophet, classic polysynth. SEM, which is a lesser known synthesizer, but one that was used by a lot of early kind of pioneers in progressive music like Pink Floyd, guys like that. The Solina string machine, it's a classic string machine. We also have Stage 73, which is of course a Rhodes 73 suitcase. Synclavier, classic. Synthi, which is another kind of lesser known early analog synth. VOX Continental, not dissimilar to the Farfisa, kind of a more cheesy sounding organ that was used on a lot of classic records. And then finally a Wurlitzer 200A kind of clone or replica. So after the fact that pretty much everything in here sounds really, really great with the exception of just one, I'll get to that in a minute, you get so much stuff. I mean, this is basically every classic synth that you could ever hope to own. I mean, an R2600, a CS-80, the Mini Moog, the Jupiter, these are all absolute legends in their own right, and they're all incredibly capable instruments in their own right. But the fact that you get all of them as part of this bundle is really, really incredible. And I love that they've included some of these lesser known synths that people don't often think about. Things like the CZ1. It's a Casio keyboard. The original one was super tiny and super plasticky, and not that many people know about them, but they've been used on a lot of really, really great records over, over the past 20, 30 years since its introduction. But because it's a Casio, and it was originally designed as more of, not a kid's toy, but it's a Casio. We all know what we think when we think Casio. People don't think about that as much, and they've taken the time to model it really accurately and include that in here. Something like the SEM or the Synthi, not obscure, plenty of people know about it, but it's not a mini Moog. It's not something that rolls off of the tip of your tongue when you think about classic vintage analog synths, but they're just as important. If I'm not mistaken, the Synthi was used a lot on Dark Side of the Moon. It's a legendary synth. Just because it doesn't quite have the name recognition that something like a Mini Moog or a Jupiter doesn't make it any less amazing. And I think that they've picked a lot of synths that cover a lot of ground in a very cool way. We've got monosynths, we've got polysynths, we've got more kind of digital stuff like the DX7 and the CMI, we've got more classic analog stuff, we have some more specialized stuff like the Solina, which is really just like a string and brass pad machine, but then stuff like the Jupiter, which can really do it all, or the Matrix 12, which is an incredibly deeply featured synth. So that's my next glowing piece of praise for this, is just how much you get with the plug-in bundle. And the plug-in bundle, by the way, is $4.99 to buy outright, or you can subscribe to it via Splice, I believe, for $10 or $12 a month, which is what I'm currently doing. So I love that they give you both options. You can either just buy it, get access to everything along with updates, or you can do it month to month if you don't quite have that $500 to shell out all at once. Very, very cool and very, very generous of them. So each one of these, let's just load up the ARP here as an example. Not only does it sound absolutely great, it also has a ton of really, really amazing features. The first of which is that we can actually resize these windows very, very easily. This is something that a lot of plugin manufacturers overlook. And when you're working with plugins that have really big and involved interfaces like some of these do, something that can come really in handy. There's a lot of plugins out there that it's a little difficult to resize them. They've not only are you able to click and drag on the corner, you also have this nice convenient view menu built in. It's very, very cool. I think a lot of other plugin manufacturers could really take a cue from this. Beyond that, though, it looks great. It looks exactly like an original ARP. And each of these look exactly like what they're supposed to emulate. There is no, beyond the names being incredibly clear, and them having gotten the rights to the actual names themselves, it's, they've really taken the time to go in and emulate the whole rack case and the handle up top, and they've used the right colors, and on some of them you can even see there's like some, road wear and tear on the keyboard. They've really taken their time to make them look really nice and just bring that much more of an authentic experience along to the whole thing. Then, of course, with something like the ARP, which is a semi-modular synth, and some of these other ones in here that are semi-modular, or indeed fully modular, we've got these patch cables you drag and drop exactly like you would expect with a real patch cable, which is so cool. So you can build custom patches to your heart's content, but they also have, look at that. That is literally hundreds of presets just for this one module, and each of them has tons and tons and tons and tons of really, really great sounding presets. Very, very strong work there. I've said in a lot of our plugin reviews, I love it when they give you a lot of really great, easy to use presets where you can just jump in and start creating right off the bat. That's an important feature to be in a plugin. Not that I use presets all the time. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Totally depends on what I'm doing. But the fact that they've included them is always nice. I would rather have a ton of presets and not use them than not have any presets at all and have to sit there and build patches or build settings from scratch every single time I click on it. I'm a big fan of starting with a preset and then kind of tweaking the recipe to taste, so to speak. That's a much easier way for me to work, so I can kind of start with something that's close and then dial it in from there, and this is all ideal for doing that. Now, all of this is kind of ignoring the biggest reason that I love V-Collection, and that is that we have Analog Lab, okay? A lot of companies have this, kind of an all-in-one host application, like the Complete Control app from Native Instruments that handles all the Native Instruments sound libraries, or Play from East West, or Sample Tank and Syntronic from IK Multimedia, where it's kind of one application that holds all your presets, allows you to load things really, really easily, browse things really, really easily. But the big kicker for me in Analog Lab is this whole section down here. Because not only have they integrated all of these settings, you can go deeper and you can edit everything if you need to, and you can add effects and do all kinds of stuff, but they have this whole section here where it's taken the most kind of important or commonly accessed parameters on your synthesizer and put them all into one very, very easy to use place. So if you have one of Arturia's Keylab controllers, like we did a review on the Keylab 49 not too long ago, it was a great controller. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring it with me on my big trip that I'm out on right now. But if you have one of the Keylab controllers, your whole set of 8 encoders and 8 faders that are built into your Keylab controller automatically map with 0 effort to all of these, and it changes based on what synth you're using. So let's say we go in here, we grab our ARC 2600, right? And we load that up. Boom, all of these have changed to reflect the most commonly used parameters on an ARC 2600. You can go in here and choose whatever you want, of course, but they've pre-mapped everything to the stuff that you're going to be wanting to access most commonly, things like cutoff and resonance, and on some of them attack and decay, simple envelope stuff, the stuff that you really reach for right off the bat when you're editing a patch. And it changes again from synth to synth. So if we pull up the CS-80 and we pull up a patch on the CS-80, boom, now we have brilliance and resonance. It changes to each synth, but it's all pre-mapped to your controller, which means that you instantly, with 0 mapping effort on your behalf, if you use one of their controllers, you have total hands-on control of your synths at all times. You don't have to do any work. You don't have to play this guessing game of trying to go in and MIDI map stuff and right click and learn and all this kind of stuff. It's just right there, and it works perfectly right off the bat. When I was using the Keylab 49, I'd use it constantly. It was one of my absolute favorite features. And I said in that video, in that review of that controller, that was one of my favorite features. And so this is the other side of it. This is where it integrates with Analog Lab. And it's true of everything. It's not just the synthesizers. If we go into pianos and we pull up a grand piano sound, now we have hammer hardness, we have soundboard resonance. It has all of the different controls for the pianos. And the same thing with the organs, same thing with everything that is included in Analog in V-Collection. It's all right there, and it all maps automatically to really commonly used stuff. But again, you can go in here and you can remap it however you want, and it doesn't change anything with your MIDI controller. So brilliant. I really wish, Complete Control kind of does that, where they have the rotary encoders on the Complete Control keyboards. Those are great. I've used an S61 for a long time. But I think Arturia does it a little bit better just because of how immediate it is, how flexible it is. You don't necessarily have the visual feedback on the controller itself that you do with something like Complete Control, but that is a very small thing to me. I'm more than happy to glance up at the screen. But it's the fact that it gives you control with faders and with knobs. It's all mapped automatically. It's totally dynamic in that you can change it to whatever you want it to be, but it's pre-mapped really, really nicely for all of their included plugins. And then you layer in on top of that how good everything sounds and how many different synths it comes with. It's amazing, okay? So that's really everything that I want to say about it. It's really just such an incredibly intuitive and full-featured suite of stuff. I think it's awesome. There's lots of other features that I could go into because, of course, when you go in here, you have a little mixer section with all kinds of different effects that you can add, reverbs, compression, all kinds of stuff. You can, again, go in here and change how all of this is mapped. It's just so intuitive, it's so well laid out. Browsing through all your presets is dead simple. They've got some really nice, again, this whole kind of idea of using very descriptive words to find the presets that you want, but you don't also have to do that. You can go by synth, you can go by type of sound, you can go by style of sound. It's all very, very, very intuitive. But, just right off the bat, and I'm not even sure if this is 100% of everything, but we have 7,000 different presets across 20 different devices. So you're never going to be left wanting for any particular sounds. Now, the other thing that I want to mention real quick is just the quality of the presets is something that really stood out to me. I know that not every manufacturer of every plugin is going to be able to create a set of presets that please everybody. But just for me and my personal takes, I tend to like really ambient sounds. I like very lush sounds. I like sounds with a lot of character. You know, I'm not really big on like square wave and sawtooth, you know, really aggressive synth sounds. I like more ambient, smooth, round type sounds. And one thing that I noticed when I very first got V-Collection and just started scrolling through and playing with the different models is that all of the presets are they're really nice. They're really inspiring sounds. They're not just kind of these, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to throw together a quick sawtooth patch because somebody might like it someday. You can tell that the people who sat down and created the presets really inspired themselves to create presets that are complex and interesting, and they're not just simple patches. There are some simple patches in there as well that you can use kind of as an initialized type thing. So, you know, here's a basic square wave, now you can do whatever you want with it. And that's great, but just scrolling through, I found myself a lot of the presets in Analog Lab, they just inspire me more than other synth plugins. You know, I feel sometimes the presets on other plugins are a little bit maybe cheesy, a little bit silly sounding, sometimes a little bit over the top. They don't have a lot of depth to them, but that's not the case with V-Collection. Pretty much any device that I pull up within the collection and I start scrolling through presets, everything is just, it's very like deliberate. It's very well thought out and feels very inspired. It really feels like somebody out there took the time to make a cool patch. Instead of just, well, I need 100 presets for this thing, throw a bunch together. They really said, I want an evolving complex pad with FM elements. And they sat there and they really sculpted something and saved that as a preset and then gave it to you. So I love that. You know, it's easy to scroll through and find sounds that really inspire me, which is another very cool thing. Now, closing out with the only things that I am not a huge fan of, and there's really not much, but a few of the more kind of real instruments, namely the Hammond. The B3 sounds really good. It doesn't sound incredible. It sounds really good. I think that the Logic B3, the Logic organ that's built into Logic Pro X, is a little bit better and has just a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to introduce some grit. It just sounds a tiny bit more authentic. I know there's a few other organ plugins out there. IK just came out with a new one that I haven't gotten to play around with yet. I think that this B3 is fine. I think it sounds quite good. I think it's perfectly usable, but I have heard better B3 emulations out there. It's actually one of the things I always give huge props to Logic for, is their B3 that's built into Logic is outrageously nice. But the other thing in here is the pianos. It's the one thing that really falls short. I really don't find myself using it very much. I think the pianos in Sample Tank sound better. I think that the Native Instruments pianos, like the Gentleman, sound better. And those are all sample-based instruments. I'm not sure how much is sample-based versus synthesis-based in this particular piano, but it sounds a little cheeseball to me. It always has. It's a little thin, it's a little bit tinny. There's lots of really, really great controls. If we load it up here, we can take a peek. You know, you can do tons and tons of stuff. You've got American grand, Japanese grand, German grand, pop grand, classical upright, jazz upright, pop upright. Lots of, you know, velocity, adjustability. You can change all kinds of different mic settings, you know, in terms of where the mics are placed. There's some reverb stuff. There's a master EQ. It's decently full-featured. I've just found the sounds in it to always just fall a little bit short. It doesn't quite sound realistic. It sounds like a plug-in piano and not like a real piano. Now, pianos, of course, are one of the most notoriously difficult instruments to get really right, and I generally respond personally better to pianos that have a little bit of chaos in them, so to speak. Like the Gentleman from Native Instruments is a really great example. You know, there's pedal noise and hammer noise and creaks and all kinds of stuff that you can introduce that make it feel a little bit more like a real recording of a real instrument, and that stuff just isn't implemented quite as nicely in this particular piano plugin. But that's really the only one in this whole collection that I feel falls a little bit short. Everything else just blows me away time and time again. Now, a lot of these synths that they have in here, I have heard in real life. A lot of them I have. You know, I've never used a real Jupiter. I have used a real DX7. I've never used a real Mellotron, but I own a Mini Moog, or at least the Behringer clone thereof, and I have a few friends who have, you know, actual Moog Model Ds from Moog proper. And it sounds 100% convincing to me. You know, if you really sat there and A/B, patch for patch, note for note, filter for filter, I'm sure the analog thing is a little bit more harmonically complex and sounds a little more authentic or whatever. But for, you know, in an age when everybody's listening to tunes on earbuds and cell phones and in cheap car stereos and stuff, I think that it is more than enough for any producer who's just looking to get some really, really great synth sounds. So overall, I think it's an amazingly comprehensive package. I think that the integration with Analog Lab is brilliant. It works exactly how I need it to work. I think how a lot of people would like it to work in terms of all that automatic mapping stuff is just great. It's super intuitive, it's quick, it's easy. Everything sounds amazing, everything looks super authentic, and it really feels like you're using a real piece of gear, even though it's a plugin. I love plugins that look right, you know. Plugins that are just like a flat screen with knobs or whatever really bug me. I love that they've taken the time to really make it look proper, you know. Are there some synths that they could have included in here that they didn't? Yes. Something like the SH-101 or a TV303 comes to mind. A Juno as well would kind of be the other big one that's missing. But if you guys know, like the Juno, for instance, is relatively similar to the Jupiter, and you can get a lot of Juno-esque tones out of the Jupiter, so I think that might have a little bit to do with why they didn't include it. I don't do a ton with really acidy sounds like the 101 or the 303. If that's something that's really important to you, that may turn you off from this package, but that's, you know, not a style of music I spend a lot of time doing, and I'm able to find tons and tons and tons of similar sounds to that, or similar enough to get me by within other things in here. So overall, yeah, that is V-Collection 7. I think it's awesome. I think that especially, you know, even if you buy it outright for $500, it's still a great deal. If you want to subscribe to it monthly, I love that they give you that option as well. It's a big help to people who aren't able to drop that kind of money all at once. Yeah, I think overall it is a fantastic suite of synthesizer plugins. So those are my thoughts, but what do you guys think? I know there's a lot of other companies that offer big comprehensive software packages like this that do lots of synthesizer modeling. If you guys prefer the Native Instruments stuff or Syntronic from IK, which we're also going to take a look at that in a couple of videos here, and kind of compare and contrast Syntronic to V-Collection, because they're definitely competing pieces. But whatever you guys' thoughts may be, please leave them in the comments down below. Always appreciate hearing from you. If you have not yet subscribed to the Consordini channel, please do so. We really, really appreciate it. Be sure to click that notification bell to be kept up to date with our new episodes. And if you want to give this video a like or a share, that helps enormously as well. Regardless, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so very, very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.